Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which looks at any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Hosted by Ali Naithani. Here's Ali.
Welcome to the show. I'd like to get started by introducing my co-hosts. We have Janita Cathy with us today. Hi, Janita.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. And Umajanga, welcome.
Hello, hi.
So excited to do a show again today, and we have World Without Genocide with us. I'd like to introduce Dr. Ellen Kennedy.
Good to be here.
Thank you for being with us. And of course, World Without Genocide is located at William Mitchell College of Law. And you have with you as well today Rachel Carlson. And Rachel, you are a first-year student at William Mitchell College of Law. You are also the co-president of the student chapter of World Without Genocide.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So you recently took a group of students to New York and Washington, D.C. Can you tell us a little about the trip? What was the purpose of the trip? Why did you go?
Sure. Well, I was one of the students on the trip. It was actually one of the first brochures that I picked up when I started working with World Without Genocide at the student chapter. We were able to tour a bunch of different human rights organizations and also the UN, and we met with the offices of both Amy Klobuchar and Scott Ellison. It was just an amazing experience. It was a very unique way to get to know both of the cities.
One of the reasons why we do this is that so often students come to law school and they're not really aware of the full range of possibilities for which their career could be oriented, particularly as it applies to human rights. So every year over spring break, for a week, we take about 10 or 12 students on this remarkable trip.
So Rachel, what would you say would be the most memorable experience from the trip?
Sure. I really liked going to Human Rights Watch, which checked off the tourist attraction of seeing the Empire State Building, while also introducing me to this organization that I've read the reports from, but I got to hear firsthand what they actually do and how they compile those reports. And it was a very memorable experience for me.
So you visited a lot of organizations, right? Which one do you think you liked the best?
See, that's so hard. I loved all of them. I really enjoyed meeting with the Enough Project as well. That was in Washington, D.C., not in New York, but they almost have a more grassroots approach to the work that they do, which I really enjoyed hearing about. And John Prendergast, I believe, is the founder or the co-founder?
One of the co-founders.
One of the co-founders. And he I first got introduced to his work with the work that he was doing with Darfur, and to see how that has now progressed into working with one of their big initiatives is on conflict-free minerals in technology, and now they're also doing a campaign on gold, and it was very interesting seeing how that's progressed. It was great.
And Ellen, what's your experience as you watch these students who go on the trip? What do you see from them?
That's a great question, Ali, and I think I can sum it up best by quoting one of the students on the trip the very first year that we did it. The final evening, we were all sitting together just relaxing at the end of the long week, and the student looked at me and he said, "This trip has both formed and informed me." And it truly changed how he viewed his potential career in law. It changed how he viewed human rights as a global challenge. And it truly brought him to the realization that protecting innocent people around the world is a challenge that every one of us can and indeed must address in some way. I think that's it. And I see that happen year after year with each group of students we take on this experience.
So a lot of students are coming into law school for many different reasons, and now you are exposed to these issues around human rights and atrocities for many communities. How do you think this will impact your career as an attorney, or how has it impacted other students as they have graduated from William Mitchell?
You go first.
Okay. So I was a political science and justice and peace studies major in my undergrad, so I've always somewhat had a less conventional idea of what I want to do than the mainstream attorney. But this really just introduced all the different aspects that I could go into with my law degree and really impacted, I think, where I'll be going with my law degree. I really enjoyed this trip as that kind of introduction.
It really is a pivotal opportunity for students to think about the reach that their career can have. Now, that's not to suggest that every student is going to choose to work overseas, perhaps, or to work for a human rights organization, but it might mean that they choose to do some pro bono work in this kind of arena, or that they choose in some way, financially or with their own personal and social resources, to support the work that a human rights organization does. It might influence how they choose to vote in terms of selecting candidates for whom human rights is truly at the forefront of their agenda. And I say human rights meaning not only human rights at a global level, but human rights at a local level also.
Because there's certainly so much work to do as you've been on the show and we've talked about
Right.
in our own place here
Exactly,
as
exactly.
well. One of the things I was curious about, Rachel, is you said in the beginning you picked up a pamphlet, and so we also said you're a first-year law student. But before you came to William Mitchell, did you see yourself studying this or having an interest in human rights?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That stemmed from my Justice and Peace Studies degree, and I got really involved with, there was a protest against the School of Americas in Georgia, which I was a part of, and I also went to El Salvador and took part in this procession for the anniversary of Archbishop Oscar Romero's death, and that was very influential on me getting involved with human rights issues stemming from the issue that happened in El Salvador. And then actually, World Without Genocide was one of the reasons I chose to come to William Mitchell as my school because of their involvement on campus.
I'm always happy to hear that.
I bet.
Definitely,
I
we should
bet.
have interest, right?
Absolutely.
That's what makes you can enter that field.
Yeah.
We find that the circle gets complete. We host a summer institute every year for high school and college students. Now, some of our law students connect with us for the planning, and they are there to help facilitate the program, but it's really for undergraduates and for high school students. We're thrilled that this year these programs have been recognized by the state of Minnesota. We're receiving the 2014 Minnesota Ethical Leadership Award, in fact.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
And one of our students who was with us the first year of that program, which was summer 2011, has continued to participate. She is now a college junior. And every year when we go on this New York, D.C. trip, she meets up with us for dinner because she is studying in Washington, D.C. She will be doing an internship in New York this summer. So we're seeing that our high school students go on to college, and human rights has become embedded in what they're doing. And then I don't doubt that we'll see that many of our college students will choose careers in law as part of this progression.
Change starts with just one person.
Yes,
And so I'm
yes.
just curious to know, Rachel, from your perspective, do you feel that you're empowered and you can make change for the work you're
Yes.
doing?
I
do you feel
do,
it?
and I certainly hope that that has an impact somewhere down the line. I really feel that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to hear a little bit more about the trip. So you gave us a little idea of what you did. What else did you do on the trip?
You know, we toured the United Nations, which I think was a very interesting way to see the UN. It's always kind of that overarching, almost, what's the word? It's very background work almost. You hear what they do and you hear impacts of what their work has been doing worldwide, but it's so interesting to actually be there and see, you know, the inner workings of the UN. I thought that was a very interesting part of the trip.
One of the pieces of the trip that always affects students greatly is a visit to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. And this year we were particularly fortunate that we had a personal tour by the curator, Susan Bachrach, of a brand new exhibit looking at collaboration as the Holocaust unfolded. You know, we all know that it wasn't perpetrated solely by the Nazis. It was perpetrated by police and by other officials and by ordinary people in all of the occupied countries. Rachel, you were there. You saw that exhibit. How did you respond to that?
It was striking. You know, it is quite often the fact that people look at the Holocaust and say, you know, the Nazis were evil, how could these people do it? But it was these people's neighbors as well. And I think it's very striking to see that and to try to understand a situation in which someone could be put in where that is the outcome. It's shocking to me. I think everyone was a little emotionally drained after we got out of the museum. It's an amazing exhibit, but it's so heartbreaking to see no matter how many times you hear about the Holocaust.
One of our goals always in all of our work through the community, through students as well, is to inspire people to become what we call upstanders, the opposite of a bystander. So the person who will do what is necessary and often difficult and sometimes very dangerous to be moral and ethical on behalf of other people. And I really feel that people like Rachel embody that they come ready to learn the very proactive steps that they can take. So I truly want to applaud Rachel and other students like her who realize that they are the future. They are the hope.
Yeah. Well, great work, Rachel.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Keep it up, and we thank you too. I mean, without our future students like you, gaining interest in doing this type of work, it won't continue. So.
Every year you said you would take a trip. So do you go to the same places or you visit several places?
Good question. We varied the locations, the organizations, probably by about 25%. And it's been very encouraging as well as quite surprising to me that 2 students have chosen to come on the trip twice. They pay for the trip themselves. So it's a week in these 2 cities. We fly into New York. We're in New York for 3 days. Then we take a train to DC, and we're in DC for several days. And for law students who already have a very expensive 3-year obligation, the fact that they do this, and for some of them do it twice, truly is inspiring to us.
So how long is the
trip?
trip?
Is invaluable. I mean, it's definitely worth the time and the money. So.
How long is the trip?
We depart on Sunday and then come back the following Friday night. And the students keep saying, make it longer, make it longer.
I know.
That speaks loud.
Yeah, I know.
Well, we are next going to be talking about an art exhibit that is currently at William Mitchell College of Law, and it's about the Albanian Muslims who saved the Jews during the Holocaust, if I have that correctly. So please stay with us, and as we get to that segment, we're going to give you a sneak peek about what that art exhibit looks like. Well, there's currently at William Mitchell College of Law a very meaningful art exhibit about the Albanian Muslims who saved the Jews during the Holocaust. And Ellen, tell us about this exhibit.
It's really remarkable, Ali. First, the exhibit is up from April 1st through June 30th. For 4 years in a row, World Without Genocide has had an exhibit in William Mitchell's Art Gallery, and all of these exhibits are always free and open to the public.
Great.
All day, every day. Why do we do this every April? April is Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month. Last year, in 2013, Governor Dayton signed into law a bill that World Without Genocide was so proud to be involved in presenting at the legislature. And that bill designates April with that important label, Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month, throughout the state every single year. So in connection with that, we have this important exhibit. Why April? There are 6 different genocides that have their official memorialization dates in April.
I see.
Darfur, the siege of Sarajevo, Bosnia in the 90s, Rwanda, Cambodia, the Armenians, and the Holocaust. So in connection this year with the memorialization of the Holocaust, we have this startling exhibit. It came to us from Hebrew Union College Museum in New York, and it shows pictures of Albanian Muslims, ordinary people, who saved Jews during the Holocaust.
Yeah, why did even the Muslims?
Why?
I-
Why
yeah,
did they
that's
do
true,
that?
how they-
70% of the population of Albania was Muslim, a higher population of Muslims than any other country in Europe. And in Albania, there is a code of honor called BESA, spelled B-E-S-A. And BESA means the word or honor or the promise. And this remarkable code of BESA is what inspired these people to do what was morally right, to save absolute strangers in their midst. Even the King of Albania insisted that the Albanian border guards allow Jews into the country who were fleeing from Poland and Germany and other occupied countries. In 1930, before Hitler even came to power, there were 24 Jews in all of Albania. By 1937, at the beginning of the outbreak of the war, there were 200. At the end of the Holocaust, there were 2,000 Jews alive in Albania. 11 times more Jews than at the beginning of the Holocaust.
That's
How nice
amazing.
of
Was
them.
this an organized movement,
Not
or
at
was
all.
it just individuals in their own
Individuals.
homes that I'm going to save anyone that comes to my door?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. Now, think about the story of Anne Frank, who helped to try to save Anne Frank and her family. Strangers? No, it was people who knew the Franks. And who saved the Jews in Albania? Total strangers to them. And they didn't just give them food and hide them in the woods. They brought them into their homes, often for a period of 4 or 5 years.
Oh,
And you
that's
never, I've never heard of this before, I have to say. When you hear about the Holocaust, these are the things that seem to me that don't rise to the top. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I want to quote the words of the photographer Norman Gershman. Mr. Gershman is Jewish. In 2002, he was doing research on a photo essay about righteous non-Jews who had saved Jews during the Holocaust. And he began to hear snippets of the story about the bravery of the Albanians, that the entire country, including the government, was refusing to collaborate with the Nazis. When he heard that Albania was 70% Muslim, as I mentioned, he knew that he had his next story. He said, and I quote, "French saved Jews, Poles saved Jews, Ukrainians saved Jews, many people saved Jews. Muslims? What, are you crazy?" That's the story. Those were his words. Now, why did nobody hear about this? Because immediately after World War II, Albania became communist, and it was headed by a very brutal and controlling dictatorship, and it was essentially closed off to the rest of the world. So it wasn't until that country became more open in the early 1990s that these kinds of stories finally began to filter out. So with the fall of communism, Norman Gershman started traveling to Albania to interview people about these stories.
Oh, I heard that there is a documentary movie based on this. I
Yes.
don't know whether it is.
Yes, and the documentary has an incredible backstory. The film is called Besa, The Promise. As Mr. Gershman was doing these interviews, one of the families, one of the men he interviewed, a man named Reha Hosha, told him the story about how his father took in a family of Jews. And the family, the Albanian family took in a Jewish family, and they were sheltered for a number of years. When the family left at the end of the war, the Albanian family, Mr. Hosha's family, completely lost track of them. But the Jewish family had left behind 3 Hebrew language books and asked the Albanian family to keep the books safe. And that was a promise that the Albanian family made. Now remember, I said that Besa means honor or a promise, and this was a promise. And these are the words of Mr. Hosha. These 3 books in Hebrew were left, and the family promised they would return and retrieve them after the war. I don't know which family gave them to my father. I saved them in honor of my father and the hope that the Jewish family or their children will return to Albania. I do not know Hebrew. I do not know what the books say. When Norman Gershman interviewed Mr. Hosha, Mr. Gershman decided he had to help Mr. Hosha track down this family. And they spent years. They hired detectives. They went back to where the Jewish family was from in Bulgaria. They couldn't find anything. Finally, one day, almost accidentally, someone on the internet in Israel gave them a clue, and they were able to find the family who had changed their name and settled in Israel. This documentary is the amazing story of Mr. Gershman and Mr. Hosha, whose father had saved the Jews, traveling together to Israel to meet this family. Now, of course, the father was long deceased, but his son survived. And it's the story of the son who was cared for by Mr. Hosha's family and of Mr. Gershman and Mr. Hosha returning these books. It is perhaps one of the most moving stories I have ever seen in terms of a promise, an honor, a pledge, and a reunion. It's truly stunning.
Wow. Really living out the title of
Yes,
Besa, you said.
Exactly.
You know, and helping the people also. It also means helping the people in need, I believe, right?
I want to share with you just a little bit of some of the other stories from a woman who says, in 1942, my parents sheltered a Jewish family in our home and hid them for almost 4 years. Since the fall of the communists, we have made contact with the daughter who lives in America now. She gave written testimony of her family's rescue, and my parents were recognized by Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Israel, as righteous among the nations. 69 Albanians have been given that designation by Yad Vashem. Do you have any idea how many Americans have been given that designation?
No.
3.
My goodness.
3. There are thousands of people, as Norman Gershman said, French and Poles and Ukrainians and so on, who did what was right and what was just to try to save Jews. But only 3 Americans and 69 Albanians have been designated like that. One man told the story about how his family sheltered 2 Greek Jews, a brother and a sister, and they sheltered them from 1940 to 1945 and stayed in touch with the family. He says, I have so many wonderful letters and pictures from Israel. In 1992, I was invited there to receive the Righteous Among the Nations Award on behalf of my family. And for a time, I was the head of the Albanian-Israeli Friendship Association. He goes on to say, those years were fearful, but friendship overcame all fear. My father said that the Germans would have to kill his family before he would let them kill our Jewish guests.
Wow. My goodness, such meaning and
almost unbelievable.
And this is what the art exhibit will teach you, will show you.
Yes.
And so I know, Rachel, you were saying earlier that it is in the hallways as you're in the school at William Mitchell College of Law. And so having this there, what impact do you think that has on the community and the students?
I think that it just has such a great and hopeful light that it shines on, such an awful tragedy that we hear about all the time. But I think just that he's been able to capture these just striking acts of kindness that happened at that time. It's very hopeful to me that that is something that happened. And I'm so happy that he was able to share that through these photos.
We showed the film at William Mitchell, the film that we were just talking about, and brought in a rabbi, a minister, and a leader of the Somali communities, so a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim, to share some of their own words about the importance of interfaith relationships. And the rabbi was the first of the 3 to speak, and he said something that to me was extremely poignant and meaningful. He said, the fact that we view this exhibit as and these stories as being unusual is not how we should view this. He said, we should view this as the everyday. This should be how each of us lives our lives. That Besa, this extraordinary welcoming of the stranger and of the other, should be part of who each of us is. And I was very struck by that, because it is indeed having compassion and empathy and understanding for the fact that we're a global community, as we represent here around our small table.
And I think two things stick out to me is the thought of friendship overcoming fear,
Yes.
because that can hopefully move people to action, to stand up instead of being the bystander, to be the
Yes.
upstander. And then I think the other piece is learning more about what just one family did and another family can hopefully make each of us today realize it doesn't have to take an organized movement.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to take something that is passed by law. It can just be that I can make a difference, be an upstander, and protect my friends or protect my neighbors or protect the stranger that's being hurt. So
Yes.
this is awesome, and I hope more people can come and just come through the exhibit and just take in just all that is a part of our history, and then how can we apply it to our future and our today.
And you know, that's really the message that we hope people take away. We focus all the time on trying to bridge that distance from the global to the local. All of the issues that we address globally, as you just so eloquently said, ultimately reverberate for us in our own communities. So, for example, our summer institutes that I mentioned have a different theme each year. This year, it's 20 years after the Rwandan genocide, preventing hate globally and locally. How do we in our own communities embrace Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, embrace everyone who is part of how we live our lives in our own spheres?
And so, Ellen, if somebody wanted more information, can you tell us the website or where they would get more information?
Absolutely. worldwithoutgenocide.org, and we welcome people to get in touch with us, to come to programs, to be part of these summer institutes, to come to William Mitchell to see this compelling exhibit. And we do hope that the whole community will see this.
Okay, and also we have to call out something you said before. Great work on your part for getting the bill signed. When you said that
Yes.
before,
Oh, thank you.
we need to call
Thank
that out
you.
and celebrate it. So it's the
Yep.
month
Thank
of
you.
April, and World Without Genocide was a big part of that. So
Thank you so
for your
much.
good
Awesome
work.
work, awesome
Awesome.
work.
Great conversation.
Thank you so much for
and-
sharing all the stories.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
And as always, come back and tell us more. Help
always
us
a pleasure.
to learn more about this and be
Thank you.
informed. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to you changing the world, Rachel.
That's right.
She will.
I hope I don't let you down in that aspect.
You won't.
All right. And we thank you for joining us today on It's a Woman's World, and we hope to see you next time.